Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us for the Committee on House Administration's shadow hearing on protecting American democracy. It's a pleasure to have this shadow hearing here in Rochester, New York. I've traveled around the country. It's nice to be home doing this, and let me just give a brief outline of what you should expect in the next hour or so. I will be giving some brief opening remarks and then certainly turn it over to our guest, Leader Jeffries. We'll then hear from our panel of distinguished experts in democracy reform, voting rights, and election administration, and then we'll move to a series of questions for the panelists. Let me start by just thanking the mayor and City Hall for hosting us, and thank you to all the city employees who've done so much to make this warm, accommodating, and for your hospitality. And I'm really grateful. Over the years, this building, Leader Jeffries, has served Rochester in many ways, including as a courthouse, a post office, and today it remains a powerful symbol of public service and civic pride and civic life as the Rochester City Hall. So thank you to Mayor Evans again for his leadership, for hosting us. Thank you, County Executive Adam Bello, our partner on so many things, who continues to be just a great leader in this community. And I'm so proud to welcome you, Leader Jeffries, and all of you to the home of Frederick Douglass, the home of Susan B. Anthony. This is a city that is fiercely, fiercely loyal to the democratic process. It is literally in our DNA as Rochesterians. So it is fitting that we're here today in a vitally important shadow hearing examining the security of our elections, the threats they face, and the weapons we as members of Congress have to fight back against any attempts to subvert this election. And I am honored, truly honored, that House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries has joined us today. Under Hakeem's leadership, our unified caucus has provided an indispensable check on this administration in so many ways. And Leader Jeffries has charged me and our committee with the building the most robust election protection effort in American history, which up until this moment in history probably wasn't as necessary and as needed as it is now, but it is clearly needed now. And when Hakeem Jeffries is Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, and that is going to happen, we will be in a position to do so much more. But as we begin this hearing, that's really what we're hoping to do. And let me just level set for a moment before I turn it over to Leader Jeffries. The health of the democracy, the security of our elections, the strength of public trust in government, each of these are critical components of this 250-year American experiment, which we are celebrating in this moment. And in my view, and I think many of us share it, there's nothing more urgent in the moment than protecting American democracy. And it's hardly necessary, but it bears repeating all the threats that we face. The president and his allies want to take over this election. The one thing about President Trump is he says the quiet part out loud. He doesn't have much of a filter. And whether it's the Save America Act, which would disrupt election administration, keep millions of eligible voters from the polls, make it much more difficult for people to register, to express their God-given right to vote, whether it's forcing states to comply with and hand over personal private voter data to the Department of Homeland Security. He has issued illegal executive orders to block ballot access for the millions of Americans. And I'm always reminded as a New Yorker, many of the people who vote in early voting. Some vote by mail. Many vote still at voting places. If you go in the western part of this country, the tradition is far different. 50 states, 50 systems. If you're in Arizona and California, Utah, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, the vast majority of those people still vote by mail. And Democrats and Republicans vote by mail there. And we elect Democratic and Republican leaders in those places. So this is not some Democratic plot. Last month, he impulsively canceled a presidential signing ceremony for an overwhelmingly bipartisan housing bill, a bill to lower the cost of housing that are really causing so many Americans distress. But he wouldn't sign it, and he wouldn't do a ceremony because the Senate has repeatedly refused to act on the Save America Act, which would block access to the ballot. He is so interested in stopping democracy that he would rather do that than celebrate a big win that would provide housing for all Americans. So, and it's a tantrum, basically, and it's a tantrum that proves one thing. He would rather do that, distress Americans, just to have his way. But it's more dire than that. People around the president have mused about deploying the military, ICE agents at polling places. We find ourselves in a moment where, unfortunately, the federal government, rather than being a bulwark against and for democracy, it is now the aggressor against something that has not happened, certainly in the modern history. The Department of Justice is not helping us. The Department of Homeland Security not doing its duty to protect the American elections. The administration has defunded the Election Security Unit of our Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, CISA, whose responsibility is to protect American citizens. He dismantled the entire unit. And recently, Secretary Mullen has publicly threatened election administrators with investigations and jail time just for upholding the law as it is today. So in this April, if we hadn't had enough challenges, the Louisiana versus Calais, the Supreme Court demolished yet another pillar of the Voting Rights Act, which upholds our multiracial democracy. A law that for nearly 6 decades protected every American's voice at the ballot box. So in the face of all this, our committee has jurisdiction over federal elections, and we've undertaken an assessment of what's going on around the country and how House Democrats and pro-democracy allies can continue to work together to protect against these threats, to push back, to make sure that every American has access to the ballot and every single vote is counted. And I will just close with this. Our job as committee is not to put our thumb on the scale for Democrats, even though I'm a proud Democrat. This is to make sure people have access, that people have their voice. Whatever choice they make is their choice. We abide by that as Democrats. So the mission is great. Borrowing a line from a famous Rochesterian who I mentioned earlier, Susan B. Anthony, failure is impossible. So we're here today to listen, to hear from our experts, and to continue to push back against these awful, awful efforts and make sure that we bring back to government in America trust and faith that is sorely needed. So with that as just sort of a level set on my side, I'm really honored to introduce a longtime colleague and friend. I had the great privilege of serving with Hakeem Jeffries in the New York State Assembly. He left me. He went to Washington, became a big macher, as they say, and is now the leader of the House Democrats and soon going to be the United States House of Representatives Speaker and make history. So without further ado, let me introduce my dear friend, Hakeem Jeffries.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to my good friend Joe Morelle, the next chair of the House Administration Committee. So appreciative of his friendship, of his leadership, of his partnership, and the extraordinary work that Joe Morelle has undertaken to ensure that we have a free and fair election in November, and that it's the American people who are the ones who decide the fate of the Congress in the next majority, as opposed to Donald Trump and MAGA extremists. I want to thank, of course, Mayor Evans and County Executive Bello for welcoming us to the city of Rochester and to Monroe County. And of course, I want to thank the extraordinary witnesses, our panelists, who will be introduced more formally momentarily. But thank you for your presence, for enlightening us, and for your continued efforts to ensure that we are all prepared to ensure that we have a free and fair election in November. It's great, of course, to be back in the city of Rochester. Rochester, we know, has given the world many things, of course, including Frederick Douglass, Susan B. Anthony, and Joe Morelle. That's a great legacy for Joe Morelle to stand upon, and continues, I know, to make this city and Western New York proud. Let me just briefly say that elections should be about a contest of ideas, and who can make the case to the American people that they've delivered and have a vision for making life better for everyday Americans. I think the problem that we confront at this moment right now is that so clearly the president and MAGA extremists have failed the American people and have broken every single promise that has been made to everyday Americans. It was Donald Trump who promised to lower costs on day one, but costs haven't gone down in the United States of America. Costs have gone up. Life is too expensive. And you can directly tie that to policy choices that this administration has made, including the Trump tariffs, which have increased costs on everyday Americans by thousands of dollars per year, Donald Trump promised to love and cherish Medicaid, but then turned around as a result of the one big ugly bill and enacted the largest assault on Medicaid in American history, a $1 trillion cut, putting in jeopardy our hospitals, our nursing homes, and our community health centers, including right here in Western New York. Donald Trump promised that immigration enforcement through ICE in this country was going to target the worst of the worst, and then turned around and is utilizing billions of taxpayer dollars for ICE agents, masked ICE and untrained agents, to brutalize and in some cases kill American citizens and violently target law-abiding immigrants all across the country, as we just horrifically saw in Houston and in Maine. Donald Trump promised that he was elected not to start endless wars in the Middle East, but to stop them, and then turned around and has gotten us involved in a reckless war of choice in the Middle East. Iran is now more stronger than they were prior to the start of the war, and the American people are economically weaker, particularly as it relates to skyrocketing gas prices, food prices, and increased inflation. So Donald Trump and Republicans have literally broken every promise that they made to the American people. And so what's clear is that they're not interested in a contest of ideas, in articulating a vision, in demonstrating to the American people that they actually have a track record of success, because they know that's a non-starter. And so unfortunately, Republicans have apparently concluded, led by Donald Trump, that their best course of action as it relates to the upcoming midterm election is to suppress the vote, intimidate voters, and do all they can to potentially rig the outcome. That's why they launched an unprecedented gerrymandering effort in the middle of the decade. And so it's our collective responsibility, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans, to ensure that we have the largest voter protection effort in the history of the country, that we give everybody an opportunity to have their voice heard, so that it's the American people who can decide who holds the gavels in the next Congress, in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, and who gets to lead in states all across the country, from governors on down. And so again, I'm thankful to you, Congressman Morelle, for your extraordinary efforts all across the country in ensuring that the American people are prepared, that we're prepared, that civil society is prepared for a free and fair election this November.
Thank you, Leader Jeffries. Now I'm going to introduce our three panelists, and I'll call on each of them to give some testimony. If we could try to do it within about 5 minutes, and then Leader Jeffries and I have a series of questions that we'd like to just drill down on some of your testimony. And let me introduce the panel. To my left, we're joined by Bob Bauer, whose accomplishments, if I were to list them, would take us the balance of the afternoon, but has served as counsel to President Obama in the White House and currently teaches as a professor of practice and a distinguished scholar in residence at NYU Law School. So thank you, Mr. Bauer, for joining us. After that, we'll hear from Omar Noureldin, who is the Senior Vice President of Common Cause's Policy and Litigation Department. Thank you for being here. And of course, excited to have Natalie Shepard, the Deputy Commissioner of the Monroe County Board of Elections, and we will hear from each of them. So without further ado, Mr. Bauer.
Thank you very much, Congressman Morelle, and thanks to you too, Leader Jeffries, for inviting me to speak today. I will be brief within these 5 minutes. For many years, I was an election lawyer in private practice before I, as you noted, did work in the Obama administration representing Democratic Party organizations and candidates and in the thick of the political competition between the two political parties. However, I and many of the lawyers on the other side, the ones I faced in courtrooms or other contests in the course of representing my clients, agreed that there was a line that we were going to draw between rough and tumble political competition on the one hand and respect for the electoral process and protection of fundamental democratic values on the other. And as a result, along the way, and this was an elemental point in my work, I joined with my Republican adversary in the 2020 presidential election, Ben Ginsberg, who represented Governor Romney, the Republican nominee. I joined with him as general counsel to the Obama campaign in a post-election commission directed by President Obama via executive order that was to study election administration in the United States on a completely bipartisan basis. And Mr. Ginsberg and I, who co-chaired this organization, worked with other members, again, evenly divided between the two political parties, all of whom were experts on election administration, all of whom understood that beyond political competition was that line that needed to be protected. And I continued to work across the aisle in these years of my career when I also teach and remain active in public life to the extent that I can. And I find that that is a line that has come under tremendous stress, as I think reflected in Congressman Morelle's remarks and your remarks, Leader Jeffries. Unfortunately, beginning in 2000, after the Florida recount, we as a nation had committed to strengthening the electoral process through bipartisan efforts, through the enactment of the Help America Vote Act and in other ways. And yet, we have found in this period of intense political polarization, we've discovered that that line is being blurred, if not regularly crossed and threatened. We have attacks on election officials, massive information and disinformation, legal interventions by the executive branch in an attempt to make the rules for federal elections under a constitutional scheme that commits rulemaking to the states and to Congress, but not to the President of the United States. The bipartisan response that I think is necessary, that includes community leadership support for election officials, is what I'm very committed to working on. And I believe there is a constituency for it. I see that as I travel around the country. I believe very strongly in this. And what voters should know, and I'll end on what I hope is an optimistic note here, voters need to know, and those I work with on both sides of the aisle regularly state, that the election professionals who administer elections in the United States are indeed professionals. They are specialists in election administration. They are devoted, Democratic and Republican election officials, to running an electoral process that serves our voters extremely well, all the way through, from the registration process to the day of voting, to tabulation, and to any recounts, contests, or verification of the results that occur afterwards. Machines are tested. Lists are maintained. All sorts of safeguards are built into the system to protect against any concern that the votes are not being correctly counted, either inadvertently or by design. We have audits, professional audits conducted throughout our election jurisdictions that are designed to make sure that the results that are reported on Election Day are, in fact, reflective of the will of the public. And all of this is done within these jurisdictions on a bipartisan basis. So even though we have election officials in the United States who may be elected on the party ballot, they work with professionals and on a bipartisan basis within the conduct of the elections themselves in a whole host of ways. And they open up their offices to the general public, and they invite them to come in on a transparent basis to see how these elections are conducted. That's the message that I hope that all of us Democrats and Republicans can communicate in advance of this election, that they are secure, that mistakes when made, because no system is perfect, will be corrected, that the system is transparent, and that people can have confidence, and that most of all, our American voters will participate with the full commitment to the democratic process that it fully deserves. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your testimony, and it's pretty remarkable that you hit 5 minutes on the nose. I don't think there's many people in Washington that typically can do that, so kudos to you. I thank you very much, and now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Noureldin. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader Jeffries, Ranking Member Morelle. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for your leadership in hosting this hearing. The freedom to vote is under extraordinary pressure from all three branches of the federal government at once. The President has redirected federal law enforcement away from stopping crime and toward election officials and voters. Some members of Congress continue working to make voting harder for eligible citizens. And the Supreme Court has narrowed protections of the civil rights era in ways that we believe will dilute the political representation of Black, Latino, and other minority communities nationwide. We are meeting here in Rochester, the city where I was born, but more importantly, the place where Frederick Douglass and Susan B. Anthony made the case for a multiracial and inclusive democracy that did not yet exist. Neither of them could vote in this city. Both of them prevailed anyway. Outcomes are not inevitable. We get to shape them. Common Cause, founded in 1970, is a nonpartisan grassroots organization with nearly 1 million members nationwide and in every congressional district in the country. Our mission is to uphold the values of American democracy. We work to create an open, honest, and accountable government that serves the public interest. We work to promote equal rights, opportunity, and representation for all, and we work to empower all people to make their voices heard in the political process. So I want to use my time to discuss 2 things that we are doing and 2 things that I think Congress can do. First, this administration's campaign to collect Americans' voter data. For a year, the Justice Department has demanded sensitive voter files from states across the country. Not just names and addresses, but dates of birth, driver's license numbers, social security numbers. And they want to feed this into a national database and screen it against federal records that are known to produce false matches. That is the machinery of a voter purge, built in Washington, brought to you by your own government. Common Cause has gone to court in dozens of these cases. We intervened alongside our own members, everyday people, naturalized citizens, people with restored voting rights, people who move often, like students, because those are the voters that a bad match hits first. Here is the record. Of the cases seeking state-sensitive voter data that have been decided so far, the Justice Department is 0 for 17. Not one court at any level has ruled for the department. Judges appointed by presidents of both parties have thrown out these cases. I say that not to take a victory lap, although I think we're entitled to one, but because it is the clearest evidence available that the theory behind this effort does not hold up, and because voters deserve better. Second, federal agents at polling places. This year, the FBI seized ballots and voter records from the Fulton County Election Office in Georgia and searched the voter registration group's offices in Ohio. ICE agents have appeared near polling places in New York, California, and Texas. Last month, 2 ICE agents walked into an active polling place in Syracuse to confront a poll worker over a social media post. The disruption to voting that day, thankfully, was minimal, but the message was the point. One van, one visit, one news story is sometimes all it takes to convince thousands of people that it's safer to stay home than to go out and vote. That is their end game. So we plan for it. Common Cause co-leads the National Election Protection Coalition, the largest nonpartisan voter protection program in the country, including more than 300 organizations and the nonpartisan 866 Our Vote hotline. We recruit poll monitors from communities most likely to be targeted, and we train them on 4 things: what a federal official may and may not do at a polling place, how to document an incident so that it stands up later in court, and how to reach a lawyer and an election official within minutes, and how to lower the temperature instead of raising it. During the primaries, an ICE van was spotted near a polling place in a Latino neighborhood in Brooklyn. Within 10 minutes, our network had additional poll monitors on that sidewalk, and they stayed until the polls closed. We will be ready to do that again in November, but trained volunteers should not have to be the safeguard between American voters and their own government. Now, what can Congress do? 2 asks. First, fund election security. The Trump administration warns about election threats while starving officials of the resources needed to meet them. Let's talk about the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. It's a mouthful. but commonly known as CISA. CISA's election security advisors are gone. The security assessments that hundreds of election jurisdictions relied on have stopped, and funding for the centers that warned election officials about threats have been terminated. Election officials tell us they are flying blind. Congress can and must restore funding and the intelligence pipeline to states. Second, keep the SAVE Act from becoming law. It would make millions of Americans produce documents that they do not have and have to travel to a government office to register. Married women, many of whom changed their names, rural voters, far from a county seat, and older Americans without a passport. Members of both parties have recognized this harm. Keep fighting as the SAVE Act supporters try to keep passing it in Congress. And I will close with what gives me confidence. We are seeing a public response unlike anything before. People who've never worked an election are calling to ask, how do we become a poll monitor? Congregations, environmental groups, student organizations, nurses. They are not waiting to be rescued. They are showing up. And our job, yours and mine, is to make sure that when they show up, the door is open. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And we certainly appreciate all the amazing work that Common Cause does. So they've been great allies in this fight. So thanks so much. With that, I will turn it over to Ms. Shepard. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I just want to first say thank you to Leader Jeffries. Thank you to Ranking Member Morelle for leading these efforts. In the audience, I think if I haven't hugged you, that's why your name is not about to be said. But even being at the Board of Elections, I know our main role is to administer and ensure that they are fair and free. But we do have partners in government that also ensure the same thing. I've seen County Executive Bello, Mayor Evans, President Melendez, our Democratic Committee County Chair DeVay. Hey, Amy. Deputy Amy, Assistant Deputy Plonzinski. Again, just thank you all to our partners in government for being here, because that definitely shows that it goes beyond the elections that they have to go through, that they have to continue to do the work on this side. So I tried to figure out the best way to sum up public opinion versus fact without using versus. Because versus is kind of combative. It makes it seem like there are two sides fighting against each other. So those of us who are here to administer and uphold fair elections versus those who are participating through voting. And I'd like to believe that we all on the baseline understand that we have the notion, we just want to make sure that we can confidently say that the election results are honest. So that's why I don't want to use the word versus. I'm also not going to inundate this conversation with statistics and data and all of that stuff. Let's just have what I call a real family barbecue conversation. So we have millions of people who are eligible voters. So those individuals who meet the criteria to actually have the right to vote. And then that number drastically decreases when it comes to those who are actually registered to vote. So those individuals who went out and said, I'm going to take the next step so I'm able to do that during the next election. Then an election comes around and that number drastically decreases again to what we know as voter turnout. And I think that we can agree that that's a problem. I would phrase that, though, as us having an elections emotion issue. And so what do I mean by that? Elections are emotional. They impact our families, they impact our neighborhoods, our schools, and really our entire future. So I think it's important for all of us here, our honorable elected officials, leaders like myself in various positions, and everyday community members to view it as an elections emotions issue. So I just want to talk about one powerful emotion today, and that's fear. The fear of is a belief that can make you do something or it can deter you from doing something. And so how does that relate to elections? Fear, it has the ability to shape our decisions. So it can motivate us to act and get to the polls, or it can convince us to stay home. It can inspire and encourage us to be great advocates, or it can create doubt and inaction. It can make us believe that our voice matters, or it can whisper to us that our vote doesn't change anything. But let's just think about the fact that if fear keeps one person home, one person from participating in our democracy, that one turns into 2, turns into 3, turns into 4 million, and so on and so on. So now where do we go from there? I think that I think all of us in this room have this under control, but we have to unapologetically continue to spread that elections are safe and secure. Because the confidence in our elections it isn't built on one person or one office. It's built on thousands of election workers, bipartisan observers, and citizens who all play a role in this process. Not just here in Monroe County, not just here in New York State, but across the United States, elections are administered with layers of security, transparency, and accountability. And that's designed to protect every eligible vote and maintain our public trust. So if you leave here today, not just us in this room, but also those who are tuned in, I first just want to talk to our eligible voters, individuals in the United States, to just please participate. That's the most powerful voice in our democracy. You have to show up. So register, vote, and I encourage you to encourage your family and friends to do the same. The second, and this is a big one, is to verify before you amplify. I'm going to say that one more time. Verify before you amplify. So before sharing a headline, a rumor, or a social media post about elections, ask yourself one simple question. Is it true with verifiable facts? And why is that? Because misinformation leads to fear, but facts lead to confidence. And the last thing I want you to walk away with is trusting the process enough to learn about it. So our election officials, they don't ask us to follow with blind trust. They provide us with the public testing of voting equipment, bipartisan oversight, various opportunities to observe many parts of the process, audits in many jurisdictions, and legal avenues to challenge if there are any concerns. And we understand that confidence grows when everybody knows how the system works. So at the end of the day, democracy isn't measured by how loudly we argue after an election. It's measured by how faithfully we participate. Because the future of our community is decided by the voices that actually show up. So let's replace fear with facts, doubt with dialogue, which we're having here today, and I know many of you also hold town halls, continue to do that, and apathy with action. And the last thing I just want to say is thank you all, especially to our elected officials and at our federal level, for continuing to fund the things that we need to do when it comes to voter education, when it comes to securing the processes for elected officials to run for office. We truly, truly appreciate it. It does make an impact. I can tell you right here, as boots on the ground, it makes a huge impact in what we do with our work at the Board of Elections. So thank you.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much. I know we have a lot of questions. We'll try to, I'm going to ask just a couple and then turn it over to Leader Jeffries for his questions. But first of all, to the Deputy Commissioner, you raised 2 points which I think are really important, which I think about a lot. The first is, given the number of people in America who are age eligible to vote, American citizens, and the number that do not, this obsession with the small number of people who potentially vote that aren't citizens, and the number is infinitesimally small. I always challenge my colleagues on this committee, why aren't we focused more on helping make sure that people vote, participation? That's really the only way to ensure our full-throated democracy. So appreciate that, and also appreciate, obviously, all that you're talking about related to resources, which I'll come back to. But on that first question, Mr. Bauer, you've observed this, you've been involved in this a long time. What do we do to ensure that everyone who's eligible to cast a ballot feels secure doing so? And then any thoughts on how we increase participation? I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
I believe that you, Congressman Morelle, in your remarks referred to civil society. We need an all-community support for the electoral process so that voters hear from those that they trust the most within their communities. One project that I've been involved in is really rallying community support for election officials so that voters hear from those who lead the business community, the veterans community, the faith community, the education community, the healthcare community, that, to speak to Deputy Commissioner Shepard's point, truth matters, and the fact of the system should give them full assurance that they can participate in the election and that their votes will, in fact, be fairly counted and the law will be followed. And that civil society intervention, that communication from those that they trust the most in the communities in which they live, I think is especially important.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. Mr. Noureldin, in past elections, multiple states have undertaken sort of sloppy and reckless voter purges. You referenced this in the run-up to voting. That disproportionately always seems to impact voters of color and low-income Americans. So just what can we do to ensure eligible voters, if they receive a notice in the mail, that their registration has been removed from the voter rolls? What do we continue to tell people? I know what I'm telling people. I'd like to have your thoughts on that as well.
Sure. So first, call the Election Protection Hotline, 866-OUR-VOTE. It's up and running, and we have it available in multiple languages. And operators can assist voters with the rules to re-register to vote depending on the jurisdiction. And it's going to look different in every state. Some states may allow same-day re-registration. Other states, it has to be a month before, the election day. But those operators can help voters in their jurisdiction get the help they need. And calling the helpline does something else. It helps us see trends so that we can address systemic issues that are happening. And along those lines, we are ensuring that states follow the law. We've sued Indiana, and we've sued several counties in Texas, among other states, for unlawfully taking eligible voters off the rolls. They're creating a solution for a problem, as you said, that doesn't exist. And so being vigilant, calling the hotline, reporting it when it happens, and asking fellow community members, like, is this happening to you too? So that we can see those systemic trends and address them systemically.
Yeah, and I will say, you've said it, others have said it. This notion you could show up to your polling place or however you choose to vote on election day and find out that you've been purged even though you live in the same place and had voted from the same place for a decade. Now, that's not going to happen in New York. We pray. We don't see any signs of it, certainly. But other places around the country, it is happening. So when we say to people, check your registration status, people may think that that's kind of a silly thing to do, but they need to do it early and then make a plan to vote early. With my remaining time, I can be a little more liberal with the clock because I have this thing. These are really nice. We're talking about resources. So I won't ask you, Deputy Commissioner, to talk about all the ways you secure our elections, but it is extensive, and people like the president don't understand the system. That's why he attacks it all the time. He doesn't know what it is. But what could Congress do? Where would you put resources if you had additional resources from the federal government? What kind of, if grant money was available, what would you do at Monroe County Board of Elections?
Yeah, so I think I can speak for Commissioner Ortiz, who unfortunately isn't here today, and the rest of our team when I say that we actually love hearing from our constituents, phone calls, emails, showing up at the office, but mainly the most frequent interaction that a voter has is at the actual polling location. So we train thousands and thousands of election inspectors every year. They get trained on how the machines operate, on different voter interactions, the process of results reporting, and the compliance with the state regulations. And so one of the things, just to answer your question directly, that I think that we could see more assistance with, you guys are already doing a great job with it, is continuing to give funds for our cybersecurity. I don't want to talk over individuals' heads, but we do have IP security controls, we have air gap servers, and we have daily backup systems for voter databases, and just continuing to fund those efforts because there is maintenance that is required on a yearly basis. We do deal with vendors who obviously have maintenance fees every year. And so just continuing to do that, making sure that everything is upgraded, because as we were talking before we came across the hall, is that there are groups out there who their main job is to figure out what are vulnerabilities in systems and hacker groups. But we have a pretty solid one here. Well, no, I shouldn't say pretty, very solid one here. But we continue to need to upgrade as people start to get more and more and more and more in tune to the fact that they can't break into our elections. So just continue to fund us that way is great.
Very good. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Leader Jeffries.
Thank you so much, Congressman Morelle, and thanks again to our witnesses. Mr. Bauer, one of the things that I think has alarmed a lot of folks is just the relentless assault on the integrity of our elections coming from the very top. And what we've seen, which is probably unique in America's 250-year journey, that the President of the United States is the one leading the charge to undermine the ability for the nation to have a free and fair election or for people to have confidence in it. And we've seen this in a variety of different ways, this relentless assault on the ability of the American people to vote by mail, the constant promotion of lies about both the 2020 presidential election and the 2024 presidential election, and even the hiring of insurrectionists or conspiracy, theorists and, people who are blatantly unqualified to be able to serve in positions of significance in the federal government, even if that connects to election security in some way, shape, or form, being elevated. President of the United States, of course, has the biggest bully pulpit in the nation, and we have someone who has a big mouth and uses it at the same period of time. How do we, in the face of that, reality, collectively, deal with this effort to really undermine confidence in ways that can match or exceed the intensity of who it's coming from, where it's coming from?
Leader Jeffries, certainly everything you describe is correct. I made a reference to executive branch intervention, extraordinary intervention in the process, inconsistent with the constitutional allocation of authority for how elections are conducted. You mentioned the attack on mail voting, attacks on machinery, unfounded allegations about vulnerabilities in the system. All of what you suggest is true. And I'll begin, I just want to note too, that the current president has refused to concede the 2020 election. He directs those who work for him to refuse to concede the 2020 election. And in the past, he has said he's not prepared to concede any election that he didn't, in fact, win. So all of this, of course, is extraordinarily damaging to public faith in the electoral process. I have to come back to something, and I don't want to sound like I'm striking the same note over and over again, but we need other leaders in the country to stand up. That includes members of his own party. I see that at the level at which I work, but I don't see it across the entire Republican Party, to be sure. But we need bipartisan resistance to this undermining of confidence in the electoral process, and we need it also within the national business communities, within the national civil society institutions like the business community and all those sectors to stand up at the end of the day. And it did make a difference in 2020. It made an enormous difference in 2020, and say to the public, with the amplification that those communities together master, that is not true. The statements that are made about the electoral process are untrue. The election was, in fact, correctly decided. The votes were tabulated. The law was followed. Any doubts about the outcome of an election were resolved through the legal recount and contest processes. That's a very big megaphone, and I think it was successful in 2020, and it can be successful again in 2026 and 2028. But, and I'll just close with this, or now I'm going to get Congressman Morelle to say I'm not sticking with my time. And I hear I was ahead of the game at the beginning. But the fear of retribution is an enormous factor we've never contended with before. So there is going to be some courage that's going to have to be displayed in the face of these threats.
Thank you for pointing out, in addition to elected officials, and we want this to come from Democrats and Republicans, and we did recently see Utah Republican election officials push back aggressively on the president's questioning of our ability to administer free and fair elections, and that was welcome, and certainly I think we need to see more of that. Civil society, as we've talked about, is going to be important here. But thank you for talking about the importance of business leaders actually stepping up and making it clear about the importance of free and fair elections to who we are as a country, and as a matter of fact, to the ability of business leaders and companies to continue to be successful. They rely on a stable democracy and certainty that comes with a stable democracy, and they have a stake in pushing back in different ways against some of the lies that are being told. So I think that certainly is something that we're going to continue to strongly encourage business leaders to be able to do. It's the patriotic thing to do at this moment. Mr. Noureldin, thank you for your testimony and all the work that your organization is doing, particularly the hotline, and I look forward to, as we travel the country, amplifying the availability of the hotline so that people are utilizing it at a moment where there is great uncertainty. Talked about the potential for intimidation at polling sites utilizing federal resources. Now, thankfully, the Supreme Court did the right thing in a decision, I believe, last December, prohibiting the president from being able to federalize the National Guard, which many of us believe was part of a scheme potentially to unleash troops on jurisdictions across the country in a midterm election. That ability, at least by the Supreme Court in a pretty decisive decision, has been taken away from him. You did reference the possibility of ICE agents or others. We're continuing to fight to protect sensitive locations like polling sites, and that's a congressional battle that will continue. But how would you suggest we push back against the possibility, or states and jurisdictions, localities who have the responsibility to administer elections, push back against the possibility of federal agents being unleashed, even if modestly, designed to intimidate people?
I think the first thing is educating voters and election officials about what federal officials can and cannot do at a polling location, and ensuring that they have a plan so that local election officials know what to do if that does happen, or they get some intelligence that that might happen. Who do they call? How do they de-escalate? And how do they ensure that the polls remain open and that people feel safe still coming to those locations? I think the second is that we're trying to, and I'm sure you all, as you travel the country, ensure that voters have a voting plan. So vote early, vote by mail if you can, and if you decide to go on election day, which many people do, I remember taking my mom, and her and I used to go vote together. That was something that we loved to do at our local polling place. Go with a family member, go with a friend. Make it something where you feel like you have community and support in doing that. And then I think the other piece is making sure that election officials and elected and appointed leaders amplify that message around making sure that you have a voting plan going into November. And the last, as you mentioned, Leader Jeffries, is promoting the election protection program, the poll monitoring program, and the hotline, because a lot of what we believe that this administration is trying to do is scare people, and what we want to do is say, we've got this. We've got poll monitors that are not going to let that happen, and if they do happen, we're going to report it, we're going to create incident reports, and we're going to create a strong record to fight them in court.
Questioning witnesses, but Joe, am I all right?
Yes.
So Deputy Commissioner Shepard, thank you for your testimony and your service to the people of Rochester and Monroe County and Western New York. And thank you for, I think as you framed it, a backyard barbecue type conversation, cookout conversation, because I think we do need to speak in plain language if we're going to reach as many everyday Americans as possible. Also appreciate your use of alliteration in your testimony. And you talked about sort of fear on the one side and facts on the other. And how can we, as members of Congress, help election officials like yourself amplify the facts to the greatest number of Americans? Because I do think, as you've pointed out, that those facts are comforting, but our ability, particularly given the social media algorithmic environment that we live in right now, which tends to promote conflict and chaos and controversy as opposed to common sense facts. How can we help you and elected officials, election administrators like you, elevate the facts to reach the greatest number of people?
Yeah, so I'll just continue on with my theme by giving just another example. You know, I think a lot of us have probably heard the squeaky wheel gets the most attention. And so just plainly, I would say we got to be squeakier. But as Professor Bauer said, we really need a megaphone. And what does that look like when it translates down to what you at the federal level can do for us down here on the ground? In the community that I grew up in, we are probably one of the most eligible voter sector in Monroe County who do not vote. Many of us are not even registered. Many know that my story is I became registered because I ran for office. I wasn't even registered before then. So just knowing that the way to reach us, we see a lot, just like you said, on the social media algorithm. That is where a lot of the individuals who are eligible are not voting. That is where they essentially live, right? And so continuing to help us here in Monroe County, Commissioner Ortiz has worked with our counterparts to really amplify our social media presence, which, as you know, does cost money. We have started a community engagement team, which also is a part of what we do, but because it is not, I would say it's not required of us to do that stuff. We do need assistance from you guys to help with our counterparts, to let them know how important it is so we can continue to grow that part of what we are doing. We have seen that it has been very effective when we actually go into the communities that aren't necessarily visited throughout the year or in off seasons for certain elected officials, because obviously our elected officials are off doing work, but that community who is not engaged, it's like they need a string of engagement. They can't just be engaged and then we're like, okay, they're gonna go off and then do their own research. It's like they need to walk hand in hand with us, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that does take resources. It takes bodies. It takes individuals who are from that community to understand that this is gonna take time. And, you know, with time comes money, and a lot of times people need to be able to provide for their families. So if they're going to spend 20 plus hours a week out in the community trying to get people engaged, letting them know how politics actually impacts their everyday life, they need to be compensated for that. And so I think, I hate to say that everything revolves around money, but when it boils down to it, it's like, what is going to be the cost for us to actually help somebody understand that politics can help save their lives and help impact and improve the things that they have going on for their family members. And so I do think that that is one way just to take a different look at what does the Board of Elections actually do, what we are here to do, and expand upon that by getting us out more into the community and making that something mandatory so that we don't have to argue with our counterparts about that particular point.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Leader Jeffries. I will say, and I think this is really appropriate here at this point, I mean, you all talked, and I'm going to close in just a second, about educating, making people aware. That is one of the ways we inoculate ourselves. The more educated we are, the more aware we are in our local community and across the country about how elections work and what the rules are, it does make it harder for people to try to subvert it. So really important. And the thing you just, the last comment you made, Deputy Commissioner, money may not, everything may not be a function of money, but you know, budgets are a list of priorities and things that you value. And what has been clear over the last several years under the current majority is they don't value local election administrators. You're really struggling against intimidation, threats, all the fears you talked about, but also a lack of resources to be able to do in your communities what you need to do. So hopefully we'll have opportunities to rectify the latter and to continue to inform and educate people. And I think we're not Pollyanna-ish. We want these elections to come off. And while ultimately the choice of who leads isn't up to leaders, it's up to voters. That's the American system for 250 years, and all we want to do is to ensure that that continues to be our tradition and our system moving forward. So I want to thank each of you for your testimony, for being here, and not only for what you do today and being here, but what you do every day to defend this democracy. I'm very, very grateful to you. This concludes the committee's shadow hearing on protecting American democracy, held at Rochester, New York, at the City Hall Again, thank you to each of you for testifying. Thank you for everybody in the audience who have joined us. And again, thank you to the mayor and the county executive for being here. And most of all, let me also thank House Leader Jeffries for traveling all the way to come here and to continue to participate in this really critically important effort to make sure our elections are protected. And with that, we are adjourned.
Somewhere we were talking, I know.